Wow, 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 wow. Do we have a lot to talk about? And I am so glad I waited until tonight to do this podcast on the Big Fight Fuel channel. This is your 2025 Miami Dolphins season review, where we are not only going to talk about the season, we are going to talk about the general manager hiring process for the Miami Dolphins. And we are going to talk about the big news that just happened. I'm filming this like around 6 o'clock, so this happened about a half hour ago. The big news of the Baltimore Ravens firing former head coach John Harbaugh after 18 seasons with the Baltimore Ravens. How this could affect the Miami Dolphins in the long run, even though I don't think John Harbaugh is going to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Just absolutely crazy. A bombshell. He is probably going to get interviewed by every team in the hiring process. Organization that makes the most sense. And I mean, I guess we'll talk about this first with the whole John Harbaugh firing. To me, the organization that makes the most sense for John for John Harbaugh is the New York Giants. I mean, they have a top 5 draft pick. They have a lot of great talent. And I mean a lot of great talent. They have a quarterback on a rookie deal in Jackson Dart. They have a running back on a rookie deal in Cam Scatterboo. They have a wide receiver on a rookie deal in Malik Neighbors. They have a top 5 pass rush in the NFL, and they have just so much potential. Do I want Harbaugh to come to Miami? Absolutely. I would absolutely love that. With everything going on around Miami, unless there's a general manager whoever they want to hire, and he forces in Stephen Ross's hands, I'm not taking this job unless you fire Mike McDaniel and we hire John Harbaugh, and I get my coach in John Harbaugh. That's the only way I see this happening. And I just don't think Stephen Ross has the balls to fire Mike McDaniel anymore. I think he's a coward. I think he's scared to do it. It's very clear and obvious. This coaching cycle wasn't as, I guess, like popping off, I guess you could say. You have your Clint Kubiaks and your Jeff Halfleys and your Kevin Stefanski's now that he got fired, and your Matt Nagy's and your Vance Joseph. I mean, they're not like sexy names, I guess you could say, by any means. But John Harbaugh, he's the type of guy you go out and you go get. You get that guy in the building. He is an amazing head coach. An absolute amazing head coach. It was just time for him and the Baltimore Ravens to go ahead and move on, because too many failed opportunities in the postseason. This season was obviously a disaster for the Ravens, and they lose that game Sunday night off the field goal by Loop, and the writing was kind of on the wall. The writing was on the wall for whoever was going to lose that game on Sunday night was going to get fired. The Ravens ended up losing. 2 nights later, John Harbaugh is gone. Now John Harbaugh is going to be a top candidate for multiple teams around the NFL. It is Tuesday night. The Miami Dolphins have still not fired Mike McDaniel. He did a presser yesterday saying that he would be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins as long as he has been informed otherwise. But he also said he was going to be a part of the general manager process, which that is absolutely not the case, as we'll talk about that in a little bit. But John Harbaugh is a clear upgrade over Mike McDaniel. A clear upgrade. And, he might not get instant success here this season with the Dolphins. Because, let's be honest, the Miami Dolphins are not going into a good situation this season. They are going to take on a massive cap hit with Tua Tagovailoa, who said yesterday to the media that it would be dope for him to get a fresh start on a new team. So it's going to hurt the cap situation tremendously. But I think they are going to move on from Tua Tagovailoa this offseason. They are going to move on from Tyreek Hill this offseason. And that is their two biggest contracts, is Tua and Tyreek Hill. They are going to move on from them. They have a lot of young players on this team. They have a lot of holes that they need to fill. They do not have a franchise quarterback on this roster. And the answer is not Quinn Ewers. So they do not have a franchise quarterback on the roster. They have an absolute gauntlet of a schedule this upcoming season, where you look at that schedule, this team might not win more than 4 games next season. And that is being generous, ladies and gentlemen. That's being generous. So could a guy like John Harbaugh come in here and fix the culture immediately and give Miami a tough team mentality, which they absolutely need? Yes. Stephen Ross has ties. He very much knows the Harbaugh family. He tried to get, I believe, Jim Harbaugh into Miami a couple years ago. That did not work. He's now got the opportunity to go ahead and do it with John. But my doubt is now, because of everything I just listed, what if John Harbaugh doesn't want to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins because of everything around the team right now? And I'm going to be honest with you. Right now, being the head coach of the Miami Dolphins or being the general manager of the Miami Dolphins is not like a job that's like, oh, that is something that I would want to take on. That's just my opinion. I don't think being the general manager or the head coach of the Dolphins is like it's not like I need that job. That is top power. That is top power, but it's like, okay, I absolutely need, that is, we're in such a good situation. It's not. It's not. The team is going to absolutely suck next year. They're going to be terrible. They have no money whatsoever. It sucks. It sucks. So, honestly, Stephen Ross is absolutely clueless for keeping Mike McDaniel. Status quo was not acceptable. This is worse than status quo. And Mike McDaniel is still the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And, I guess this can transition into our next topic. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it is a huge deal, but I don't think John Harbaugh is going to be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins unless somehow, like later this week or next week, the organization ends up firing Mike McDaniel. But then at that point, it's like, okay, you fired Mike, but you're getting a late start into the hiring process where teams have probably already interviewed John Harbaugh. Because you're not going out there and firing Mike McDaniel to go interview Matt Nagy or to go interview Vance Joseph or Raheem Morris or Kevin Stefanski. I like Kevin Stefanski. He's a 2-time Coach of the Year. He's a good offensive mind, but he doesn't have the best track record. And honestly, I don't know if I would rather have him over Mike. But the only reason you are going to fire Mike McDaniel, which I don't think is going to happen, but if you did, the only reason you're going to fire Mike McDaniel is because you know for certain you have a very good possibility of hiring John Harbaugh as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. So now we can transition to general managers. So the Dolphins, since yesterday, they interviewed more guys today. But I want to read you something very interesting. The Dolphins had requested permission to interview 6 guys yesterday for the general manager position for the Miami Dolphins. And those names are as followed. Tariq Ahmad, the San Francisco 49ers Vice President and Player Personnel. John Eric Sullivan, Green Bay Packers Vice President of Player Personnel. R.J. Gillen, San Francisco 49ers Assistant General Manager. Alec Hellaby, Philadelphia Eagles Assistant General Manager. John McKay, Los Angeles Rams Assistant General Manager. And the last one from this list yesterday is Josh Williams. Okay? We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Josh Williams, San Francisco 49ers Director, Scouting and Football Operations. And then they interviewed Chad Alexander, Assistant General Manager for the Los Angeles Chargers. Do you guys realize something with that list? Do you realize something? 3 of those names that I just named you are from the San Francisco 49ers organization. That's fishy. That is very, very, very fishy. And that tells me they're interviewing all these guys from the 49ers because they want to keep Mike happy. Because they want Mike to feel comfortable with the next hiring of the general manager. Because they want to hire somebody who is going to want to work with Mike McDaniel. And this is from Albert Breer today. San Francisco 49ers Director of Scouting and Football Operations Josh Williams has a strong relationship with Mike McDaniel from their stint working together in San Francisco. That doesn't spell well for me. That doesn't make me all confidence in the world. Because that right there just tells me they're trying to appease Mike. Which, that is the last thing you should be doing. That's the last thing you should be doing. Let me find Barry Jackson real quick because he said some interesting things today. But the last thing you should be doing with a head coach that has failed the organization over and over again. He even said it himself. He came into this organization 4 years ago to bring playoff wins and championships, and he's failed at it so far. McDaniel said it himself that he's failed to bring playoff wins to the Miami Dolphins. So what's going to change? You're basically forcing Mike McDaniel on the new general manager. What good is that? What kind of an organization is that? It's fucking bullshit is what I'll tell you. And yesterday, McDaniel said that he was going to be a part of the hiring process for the general manager, which I was... Thank goodness I didn't do this yesterday because I would have went absolutely berserk on Stephen Ross for allowing that to happen. But this was according to Barry Jackson today. He said, per source, the 6 people who will be involved in Zoom interviews with six eternal general manager candidates from the Dolphins side will be Stephen Ross, Tom Garfinkel, Troy Aikman, Dan Marino, Brandon Shore, and Danny Silman, who is Stephen Ross's son-in-law and the CEO of Ross-owned Relevant, a sports and entertainment firm that creates and operates global events. Mike McDaniel will not participate in these interviews. And then he follows up by saying, all the media in it, I don't know how to say that word, misinterpreted McDaniel's response yesterday regarding his level of involvement in general manager search. Dolphins simply getting information from McDaniel about candidates, as they would with anyone who knows the candidates. He's not making the candidate list or the decision, obviously. So, the fact that he is not in interviews is awesome. Because, he hasn't been fired yet. The season was over 2 days ago. And Mike McDaniel is still the head coach of the Miami Dolphins going into next season. Again, things can change. Do I have confidence that things are going to change? Absolutely not. I think Stephen Ross, I think he's obviously scared to fire Mike McDaniel. I do. But what I will say is, the first question these guys are being asked in these interviews is, are you willing to work with Mike McDaniel as the head coach? And as they should give a straight up, honest answer, yes or no. Are they willing to work with Mike McDaniel as the head coach, or do they want their own guy? And obviously, they would probably go with the guy who's willing to work with Mike McDaniel as the head coach. But this is ass backwards, because he should have been fired yesterday. The Atlanta Falcons ended the season on a four-game winning streak to finish the season 8-9. What did they do? The night they beat the Saints, hours later, they fired Raheem Morris. Gone. Didn't matter that they ended the year on a four-game winning streak. Their season was lost on their five-game losing streak. The Miami Dolphins, they were hot at a time. They won 5 out of 6. And they go to Pittsburgh and they get absolutely embarrassed on national TV. They start the year 1-6, 2-7, and they ended the year 5-3. Doesn't matter. Despite your success late in the season, it doesn't make up for your mistakes and your mishaps early in the season. The first 7 games costed you the season. The first 7 games of the season, from Indianapolis to Cleveland, costed you the entire season. And honestly, Mike should have been fired after the loss to Carolina. I guess we could it's like a nice transition. We go from Harbaugh to general managers to the season. I guess we could talk about the season now. Okay? Mike should have been fired after they lost to the Carolina Panthers in Week 5. Mike McDaniel should have been fired. They blew a 17-0 lead. They were cruising in that game. They didn't make adjustments. They couldn't run the ball. And they end up losing that game 27-24. If you guys remember, the next day, I absolutely lost my mind of how him and Chris Greer still had jobs after that game. There's multiple occasions Mike McDaniel should have been fired when he was not fired. And he should have been fired after they lost to the Carolina Panthers. In my honest opinion. He should have been fired by Week 5. So they start the year 0-3. They get absolutely blown out by Indianapolis to start the season. Pathetic fashion. Team was not prepared. Mike did not prepare the team all summer long. They beat the Jets by 6 points. Tyreek Hill gets that nasty, gruesome leg injury in the third quarter of that game. They beat the Jets by 6 points. Nothing special. That game felt more like a loss because Tyreek Hill got injured in disgusting fashion, and we lost Tyreek Hill for the season. Then, like I just mentioned, they lose to the Carolina Panthers after being up 17-0 in the second quarter. Early in the second quarter, may I add. And I don't think they scored again until late in the fourth quarter, with like 5 minutes to go or something like that. They didn't score again. It's just pathetic. He should have been fired right after that game. Both him and Chris Greer. Then they lose at home to the Los Angeles Chargers. Everybody remembers how that ends. They score a touchdown with 40 seconds to go. They're up 1. Jalen Phillips looks like he's got the sack. Justin Herbert slips out of his arms, goes to Ladd McConkey for 40 yards, and they lose that game too. And then the following week, they played the Cleveland Browns on the road, who have the same exact record as them. You want to know what happens? They absolutely beat the piss out of us in the pouring rain. We just got out-toughed mentally, physically, emotionally. That's another one. Mike McDaniel should have been fired after that game. against the Cleveland Browns. Losing to a team like that, 31-6. Mike and Chris Greer should have been fired. Then we have a surprising good performance and we beat the Falcons 34-10. Great. Tua's best game of the season. Then we get to Halloween night. Or the night before Halloween, I guess. We play the Baltimore Ravens. We get embarrassed again. Again, we get embarrassed. 28-6. And that game was the straw that broke the camel's back. A move had to be made. Chris Greer got fired. And the Dolphins, they move on to the rest of the season with Champ Kelly as interim general manager. They trade Jalen Phillips. That's the only trade they made at the deadline. Massive mistake, obviously. Massive mistake. They should have traded Bradley Chubb. They should have traded Russell Douglas. They should have traded Minkah Fitzpatrick. They did not, because they thought at 2-7 they were still having a fighting chance to make the playoffs. Well, guess what? The season was fucking over when they lost to the Carolina Panthers week 5. And to make the playoffs in the AFC this season, they would have had to be 11-6. So they had no shot. So they only made one move at the trade deadline, which was a massive failure. But they get over the hump and they beat the Buffalo Bills and they embarrassed them. They humiliate the Bills. Josh Allen probably had his worst game of the season in that day. I think he had 2 turnovers. But they curb stomped the Bills 30-13. Probably the best feeling all season. Team gets on a 3-game winning streak. They beat up on a bunch of scrub teams. They beat Washington by the skin of their teeth. They survive against the Saints. They absolutely beat the shit out of the Jets. And you're like, wow. This team is 6-7. How did we get from here? We were just 2-7 a month ago. Now we're sitting here at 6-7, going into a big primetime game on Monday night in Pittsburgh. Can we win in the cold on the road against a playoff caliber team? No. We pooped the bed once again. Tua Tagovailoa has 65 passing yards in the fourth quarter. And he only got all those yards from garbage time. And they lose 28-15. Realistically, 28-3. And that is probably going to be Tua Tagovailoa's last game ever in the Miami Dolphins uniform. That would be the last time he stepped on the field this season and probably ever as a Miami Dolphin. And then McDaniel makes the big move. Bench Tua. Start Quinn Ewers. So week 9 after the Baltimore game, they fire Chris Greer. Week 15 after the Steelers game on Monday night, they benched Tua Tagovailoa after he was laughing on the sidelines once they were about to lose, and then he was laughing, like hard laughing, with ex-teammate Jalen Ramsey. And Tua Tagovailoa was just awful. Just an awful season for Tua. A turnover machine. 15 turnovers. His biggest positive was that he takes care of the football and that he's accurate. He was none of those this year. He barely had any good games. He had the 4 touchdown passes against the Falcons, and that's really the only good game I remember him having this year if I'm being completely honest with you. That's the only game I remember was like, wow, Tua played great today. The only game. And all of this sucks because, I loved Tua. I did. And obviously, I'm not going to love him anymore because he's not going to be on the team next year. And he's not going to be the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. They're going to move on from him this offseason. And I really thought he was the guy. And I was so excited when they drafted him. And I was so excited, fired up with when Mike McDaniel had that video with Tua on FaceTime on the plane. I'm like, this is the change. We're going to get over the hump. I finally have a team that I can be proud of. And we're in the same boat. They just lose in the first round of the playoffs. They were a 3-game lead in the division over Buffalo. 5 weeks ago in 2023, they blow that. And we are possibly in one of the worst situations in the NFL, about to take on this massive $99.2 million cap hit that is probably going to take place sometime between March and June, I would imagine. Between those months and around March and June. But this is going to be a completely different team next year. You got a lot of questions going into this offseason. Mike McDaniel said they are going to bring in competition for the starting quarterback of 2026. Who that will be, we have no idea. So, we will have a new starting quarterback next season. We will have a new general manager probably in a couple weeks. Will Mike McDaniel get fired? I highly doubt it. He is going to be your head coach going into next season. That is my honest thoughts. Is that Stephen Ross is too much of a coward to fire Mike McDaniel. And with a bad young roster, a gauntlet of a schedule, and no cap money, they are just going to roll with Mike McDaniel as the head coach. And they're going to force the new GM to work with him, and it's going to be a shit show. So, I mean, we'll see who they hire as the general manager. Whenever that happens, that will be my next video for the Dolphins. And then I probably won't make another one until free agency. And then, unless miraculously they fire Mike McDaniel, which I don't see happening. I just don't. And at this point, I don't. And we'll go from there. So, but from here on out, it's mostly going to be wrestling content here on the Big Fat Field channel. But I will absolutely do a podcast whenever they hire their general manager, which I would probably expect it to be. I give it 2 weeks. I give it 2-3 weeks. They hired the general manager by then. So, we'll see. All right. That is your 2025 season review, along with some other stuff, some general manager talk. John Harbaugh getting fired by the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the Big Fat Field channel. Hit the like button if you like what you heard from me. Follow me on Twitter and TikTok, Conlon_Joseph. And guys, I will see you tomorrow night for AEW Dynamite. Have a good night. Stay safe. And as always, stay classy. Peace.